Hey there, guys. Good to see you again. So we are jumping into Act 3, Scene 1 right here. So one thing I want you to think about before we get into Act 3 here is that this is a tragedy. So remember, a tragedy means basically, to really summarize, it has a sad ending. Comedies typically had happy endings, tragedies typically had sad endings. Um, Tragedies also, remember, the sad ending is basically you have a character or characters that are brought down and destroyed because of the choices that they make, because of their tragic flaws. So just be looking out for that. And remember, up until this point in our play, things are going pretty well, right? At least overall, we have Romeo and Juliet, two young people, Juliet, in Juliet's case, a very young person, but two young people who have met, fallen in love, and have gotten married. So everything's going well right now, right? Everything's pretty happy. The friar hopes that this marriage is going to bring an end to the feuding between the two houses, the Montagues and the Capulets. So if the play were to end right now, it would be a tragedy, but it would be a comedy. I'm sorry, happy ending, right? Romeo and Juliet get married, the feud stops, everything's good. But we have 3 acts left. So this is when we really start to see that downturn. This is where things start to fall apart a little bit more. Act. So, and it happens really quickly. So we've got Act 3, Scene 1. We are a public place in Verona. So think about this again as being on the street. These two, Mercutio, Benvolio, and then we have Page and Men. So just some of the people that are with them. Mercutio and Benvolio might be in a bar. They might be at a restaurant. They might just be walking down the street through a marketplace. There are a lot of different ways to show this scene. So think of them as being somewhere just hanging out in a public place. Okay, so Benvolio starts out the scene, and this tells us a lot about Benvolio's character right here. It says, I pray thee, good Mercutio, let's retire. So let's leave, go somewhere else. The day is hot, the Capels or Capulets are abroad, and if we meet, we shall not escape a brawl. For now, these hot days is the mad blood stirring. So Benvolio, and this is important, he wants to leave. For no other reason than he just says it's hot outside. If we run into some Capulets, everybody's so irritated because it's so hot, a fight's going to start. So Benvolio is trying, again, like he did at the very beginning, he's trying to avoid fights, right? He's trying to say, no, we don't want to be a part of this. Let's be preemptive about this. Let's try to get to a situation where we're not going to get into a fight with other people. Because remember, the next person that starts a fight in the city by the prince's decree is going to be executed. Mercutio says, Thou art like one of those fellows that when he enters the confines of a tavern, claps me his sword upon the table and said, God send me no need of thee. And by the operation of the second cup, draws him on the drawer, when indeed there is no need. So Mercutio, again, talking in this very flowery, hard to understand way, basically is kind of making fun of Benvolio and saying, You're always really quick to start fights, Benvolio, which we know isn't true about him. But Mercutio, we know how he is. He likes to make fun of people. So that's what he's doing to Benvolio here. And they go back and forth a little bit here. Mercutio keeps saying, Benvolio, you are always trying to pick fights. Everything you do, he said, didst thou not fall out with the tailor for wearing his new doublet before Easter, with another for trying his new shoes with old ribbon, and yet thou wilt tutor me from quarreling. Benvolio says, I'm the one who quarrels a lot. You're the one that's always starting fights. And in the middle of this, they're just kind of going back and forth again, having a good time. Then here comes Tybalt, Petruchio, and others. So Petruchio, just for the sake of putting it down, is another of the house of Capulet. So he's just another man that is with them. So he's kind of he's like Peter and Samson and Gregory. He lives with them, works for them, and is kind of a hired sword. So here comes Tybalt, Petruchio, and the others. So their enemies walk up. It's a hot day. Benvolio says, By my head, here come the Capulets. Mercutio says, By my heel, I care not. And Tybalt walks up, says, "Follow me close, for I will speak to them. Gentlemen, bid them a word with one of you." Mercutio says, "And a word with one of us, couple it with something. Make it a word and a blow." So already, right away, Mercutio is trying to start a fight with these guys. Remember, Mercutio is not part of the House of Montague. He is actually related to Prince Aeschylus, but he's always hanging out with the Montagues. So he would be on their side. Um, so right away, Mercutio is trying to start a fight here. Tybalt says, "You shall find me apt enough to that, sir, and you will give me occasion." Mercutio says, "Could you not take some occasion without giving?" Tybalt says, "Mercutio, thou consortest with Romeo." So now they're starting to call each other out, basically. Mercutio is making fun of Tybalt. Tybalt calls out Mercutio for always hanging out with the Montagues, who is the Capulets' enemies. And Benvolio here tries to shut down the fight again, as he always does, and says, "Hey, we talk here in the public haunt of men, either withdraw into some private place or reason coldly of your grievances or else depart. Here all eyes gaze on us." So basically, imagine these two guys are starting to shout at each other from across the street. Benvolio says, "Look, everybody's looking at us here. Let's get off the street and go somewhere else if you guys want to argue and fight. But let's not do it in the street, because remember what's going to happen to the next person who starts a fight in the street." Mercutio, as is Mercutio's wont, doesn't care. Basically says, "I don't care. They can look at us. Bring it on." And then, as if to make things even worse, here comes Romeo. Benvolio wants to leave. Mercutio stays. Tybalt enters, looking for Romeo. And now Romeo, enters. One of the things that's going to make this scene awkward is that, remember, Benvolio and Mercutio knew that Tybalt had challenged Romeo to a duel, but they never told him about that. So Romeo has entered this scene where Tybalt is looking to fight him, where he has issued him a formal challenge to a duel, and Romeo has no idea. He just doesn't know because his friends never told him about it. So Romeo's completely clueless, and Tybalt thinks that he knows that he's issued him a challenge. Tybalt says, "Well, peace be with you, sir. Here comes my man. So forget about you. Here's Romeo. He's the one I really want." Tybalt calls him out right here and says, "Romeo, the love I bear thee can afford no better term than this. Thou art a villain. So I hate you. You're a villain." Romeo, remember who Tybalt is. Tybalt is Juliet's cousin, right? So Romeo has just gotten married just this morning. This is like in the afternoon of the same day that Romeo and Juliet were married. Romeo has just married Tybalt's cousin. So Tybalt is now related to him through marriage, but Tybalt doesn't know that. So Romeo goes back and forth, and these two talk for a little while here. Romeo goes back and forth, and he's trying to talk Tybalt down. Okay, so he's basically saying, "Look, the reason I have to love thee doth much excuse the appertaining rage to such a greeting." So basically, look, I have a reason to not want to fight you, but I can't tell you what it is, basically. Just leave it be, trust me. Tybalt continues to insult him. Romeo says, "I'm not going to draw my sword." So Romeo, in this case, does not want to start a fight. All right, so we'll put that down. Romeo enters. Tybalt challenges Romeo. And whoops, Romeo refuses. If I could type and talk at the same time, it'd be really cool. So Romeo refuses the challenge from Tybalt because he just married his cousin. He doesn't figure a good way to start a marriage is by getting into a fight with your wife's cousin on the day you were married, right? Mercutio, though, remember, has already been talking to Tybalt. He's already upset. And he says, "Oh, calm, dishonorable, vile submission." So basically, the way that Romeo is backing down is disgusting to Mercutio. He doesn't understand it. Alla staccato carries it away, which is a fencing term. Tybalt, you rat catcher, will you walk? And he draws his sword. So Mercutio is basically going to stand up in Romeo's place and challenges Tybalt. All right. So Mercutio challenges Tybalt to defend Romeo. Mercutio challenges Tybalt, and then we have our first fight of this scene. Mercutio and Tybalt. Basically, this is the formal challenge right here. He draws his sword and challenges him to a fight. Tybalt says, I am for you, or all right, let's do it. Draws his sword. Romeo tries to stop them. Gentle Mercutio, put thy rapier or your sword up. Comes or your passado. They fight. So the two of them are fighting. Romeo tries to get Benvolio to stop the fight. So he's running over to Benvolio, trying to get him to stop it. At this point, Romeo stands in between the two of them. So I want you to think of Mercutio and Tybalt on either side, right here, fighting with swords. Romeo stands right in the middle of them. Old Tybalt, good Mercutio, and Tybalt, under Romeo's arm, thrusts Mercutio in. So Romeo's standing in between them, and when he can't see him, Tybalt reaches around Romeo and stabs Mercutio in the side. And then Tybalt runs away because he just stabbed the prince's cousin, right, in the street in front of God and everybody. Mercutio says, I am hurt, a plague, both your houses, I am sped or spent, finished. Is he gone and hath nothing? So at this point, Mercutio's been stabbed. He says, I am hurt. Romeo says, courage, man, the hurt cannot be much, right? So it's not too big of a deal, right? You're doing okay, aren't you? I know you were stabbed, but it's not that big of a deal. Mercutio says, no, it's not too big, but 'twill serve. Ask for me tomorrow, and you shall find me a grave man. So Mercutio, while he is dying, because he is dying, makes a pun, says, ask for me tomorrow, you'll find me a grave man, ha ha ha, because grave in the ground. Grave also means to be very serious. Why the devil came you between us? I was hurt under your arm. Romeo says, I thought all for the best. He was just trying to stop the fight. Mercutio says, help me into some house, Benvolio, or I shall faint, a plague of both your houses. They have made worms meat of me. I'll have it soundly to your houses. Exit Mercutio and Benvolio. All right. So Mercutio fights Tybalt. Romeo tries to stop it. Mercutio is stabbed and dies. So that's the end of Mercutio. Benvolio runs out. Romeo gets upset with himself here because he says, thy beauty, O sweet Juliet, thy beauty hath made me effeminate, and in my temper softened valor's steel. So I didn't stand up to Tybalt when he insulted me because of Juliet, and now because of that, Mercutio is stabbed. And then Benvolio comes in and says, Romeo, brave Mercutio, is dead. Mercutio steps off the side and dies. Romeo said, this day's black fate on no days doth depend. This but begins the woe others must end. So basically, this has started something that I'm going to finish. And then, conveniently, Tybalt comes back in, which is generally a bad idea. But he does anyway, because he's Tybalt, and all he cares about is fighting. Benvolio says, here comes the furious Tybalt back again. Really obvious. Romeo says he gone in triumph from Mercutio slain, away to heaven, respective lenity and fire furied be my conduct now. So Romeo is upset. And then in this line right here, we see Romeo calls Tybalt a villain, just like Tybalt called Romeo a villain earlier, which is just an insult. It's a way to challenge someone to fight. And he's talking about Mercutio's soul is a little way above our heads. Stay for thine to keep him company. Either thou or I or both must go with him. So basically, we are going to fight, and either you or I or both of us are about to die. We're going to be where Mercutio is. Tybalt says, thou wretched boy that did consort him here shall with him hence, so I'm going to kill you just like I did Mercutio. Romeo says, this shall determine that. They fight, and Tybalt falls. So Romeo versus Tybalt. Tybalt is killed. Benvolio says, Romeo, away be gone, the citizens are up and Tybalt slain. Stand not amazed, the prince will doom thee death if thou art taken, hence be gone away. So basically, you just killed somebody in the street. The prince is coming. When he finds you here, he's going to sentence you to death because you were part of a fight. And basically, Romeo says, oh no, this is terrible. Benvolio says, why are you still here? Why dost thou stay? Romeo leaves. And then here come the citizens. So now we have Mercutio dead. We have not Benvolio. Mercutio's dead, and Tybalt is dead. There was a big fight, 2 dead bodies. The citizens come in, and for the rest of this, Benvolio basically stands up and says what happened. So he recounts the fight to the citizens, the prince, and everybody else. So enter Prince, Old Montague, Capulet, their wives, and all. So basically, a lot of people come in. All right. Flees. Benvolio tells the story of what happened to the prince and the Capulets and the Montagues and everybody else. Lady Capulet is very upset, and right away she says this was Romeo's fault. He should be killed. Benvolio tells the story, which we're not going to go through because it's basically everything that just happened. And he does tell it straightforward, so he doesn't make up anything about it. He says Tybalt came out, challenged Romeo. Mercutio stood up for him. Tybalt killed Mercutio. Mercutio came back, and Romeo killed Tybalt. Lady Capulet says, Romeo slew Tybalt. Romeo must not live. So this was Romeo's fault. He should die. The prince said, yeah, Romeo did kill your cousin, but he had just killed my relation, right? Remember, Mercutio's related to the prince. He was on the Montague side, but he was still related to the prince. Montague is basically saying this was just as much his fault as it was Romeo's. And the prince says, and for that offense, immediately we do exile him hence. I have an interest in your heart's proceedings. My blood for your rude brawls doth lie a bleeding. So my blood, Mercutio, his cousin, but I'll immerse you with so strong a fine that you shall all repent the loss of mine. I will be deaf to pleadings and excuses, nor tears nor prayers shall purchase out abuses. Therefore use none. Let Romeo hence in haste, else when he is found, that hour is his last. Bear hence this body and attend our will. Mercy but murders, pardoning those that kill. And then they all exit, and that's the end of that one. Benvolio tells the story, and then the prince's verdict, decision, we'll say. Typing. The prince's decision is that Romeo is exiled. So it's not as bad as death, not quite, because Romeo does still get to live, but exile means he is kicked out of the city of Verona and he is never allowed to return, which for Romeo is almost as bad as death because, first of all, he can't be with Juliet, and also, if he is exiled from Verona, that's where his family is. So everything in Romeo's life would have been leading up to him taking over as the head Montague, right? He's the son of the current Montague, and he would take over the family. He would have all of the money, all of the possessions, all of the land, all of the men working for him. And now, since he's been exiled, he won't have any of that because he won't live in Verona. Remember, this is way back in the, it was set in the 1400s, I think, 1500s. This was way before any kind of long-term communication. So if you didn't live, or long-distance communication, if you did not live in the same city, you couldn't send back and forth by messenger all the time and run things, right? Somebody else would just step up and take over the Montague family name, or else it would just kind of fall. So basically, even though the prince doesn't kill him directly, he gives him that little bit of mercy because he did avenge the death of the prince's cousin, Mercutio. He is still sentencing him almost to a living sort of death. never come back to where your family is. All right, that is it for Act 1, or that is it for Scene 1 in Act 3. There was a lot that went on in that one. So the video was probably a little bit longer than normal, but a lot goes on, and everything else that happens now is going to kind of be directly related to what just happened. All right, we will see you guys for Scene 2.